in on contact on the Saturday, so they've moved my lecture from the Monday to the Friday, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I come in about an hour after you're finished the lecture, and so
Right.
I was kind of disappointed. Although when we were in London, I did hear you in the lobby there, starting to tell stories. That's what I was sort of hoping you would do today. Is maybe tell us what you're going to talk about at Contact, and then we said we wouldn't release it till after because you've given, your exclusive to them. But I heard you telling the stories, and I can tell you from my own experience. I mean, you were one heck of a storyteller. You had everybody sort of on the edge of their seats, telling what was going on. And that's when I said to you, I'd sure like to get this on some sort of record for myself, what you've gotten, because I think you've entitled am I correct? Your lecture's titled perhaps the biggest discovery of the century?
Well, the 21st century, that's correct, yes.
Yeah. So my first question would be, why would you pick a story like this? Because you've got to see the sort of the minefield coming, and tell me why you picked the story, and then maybe tell me a little bit about what you discovered, because you've gotten more discoveries since you've sort of some conclusions.
Yes, it's ever growing, Grant, by the day. We have around about 300 to 400 pages of information so far, and it's just accumulating and accumulating. Well, I got involved in this particular investigation because I like mysteries. I like things that are hard to explain. I'm very reluctant normally at getting involved in investigations that have had so much media interest. And of course, this particular investigation which I've done, which is in regards to these mysterious bodies that appeared in Peru, had reached our internet around about June and July of last year. I think it was Guy that brought it to our attention. And I was very interested in those sort of things. However, I was, through a third party, in communications with the Inkari Institute in Cusco, Peru, who were actually dealing with these bodies, who had the bodies. And we talked with them, and they asked us if we could represent them officially as an investigative body to go out there, investigate what these bodies consist of, and try and conduct some research, some analysis, and get to the bottom of what these things are. There have been a number of people in that time that had been to the location, took samples for themselves, went away. And I believe the Inkari Institute, we wanted somebody that they could really kind of trust, to be honest with you, at the end of the day. And we already had kind of a working relationship within that circle, their contacts. So they decided to invite us over to conduct the investigation. Now, we've been involved in cases like this before. I mean, one of the cases many years ago was the Montauk monster that washed up on the Montauk beach, and it turned out to be a skinless raccoon. And we've been involved in the UK as well in regarding those type of cases. A strange beast that was seen in Buckshaw County, which is in Yorkshire. And the residents had locked themselves in, and the council meetings were cancelled because they were too scared to travel the streets at night. And it turned out to be a Newfoundland dog, which was on the loose.
Yeah.
But we like to try and find rational explanations, So this is just as awarding to us to find the rational explanations as they are the mysterious ones. And we headed into this investigation with one set in mind, is that we were assuming, because of the people that might have been involved in this case, and because the way things are in Peru, and that there's a lot of problems in regarding hoaxing and faking things that do come out of Peru, unfortunately, and corruption as well, that we were already thinking in the mindset that these things might actually not be authentic. So when we went out there, we conducted our investigation. It was a bit hair-raising at times. We didn't realise how deep we were going to get into this investigation as it unfolded. We ended up being taken to a secret location. And it was bad enough dealing with the climate of Peru. because as soon as we stepped off the aircraft at the airport in Lima, you know, it was a hustle and bustle and very busy. And we had a short flight then to about 90 minutes to Cusco, which is just climbing and climbing. Of course, it was a whole different thing getting off the plane at Cusco, because we were suddenly hit with altitude sickness, and nausea, slightly difficult to breathe. And it was very hot as well. So we had to deal with all that whilst this investigation as well. So it was probably the most challenging investigation I've had to conduct. And we started off by doing basic interviews with the Inkari, the president of Inkari, Thierry, Jamin, and his associates, and how these bodies have suddenly just literally been dumped on their worktop. Vaqueros had come in, which are literally kind of grave robbers in a sense of speaking. They'd brought these bodies in and just dumped them on the counter, and apparently said, "We want you to do the investigation. We want you to tell us what this is. But one thing is for sure, we'll be back for the body. We own it. But we want to find out what's going on." So they were left with these bodies, and they didn't really know they didn't have a contingency plan how to deal with this. And very naively, the first thing really they did is they put this out over the internet. And of course, there was just a huge response, and I don't think they were ready for it. Newspapers and reporters, thousands and thousands of emails. I mean, I don't think the Inkari Institute had ever had so many emails in their life, and they simply couldn't handle it all. They couldn't answer all the questions. They were responsible for conducting some minor tests in regarding DNA samples, but whilst we were there, they were still waiting on their results. So we asked if we could see the bodies, and they said, "Well, the bodies aren't with us at the minute. They're actually back with the vaqueros. They've got them." So they've obviously come back and took them. They didn't want to leave them at the Inkari Institute, and the reason being is because of all the press, the Peruvian government had got wind of these bodies and wanted them. And they were actually, they set up a task force known as Task Force Wawita, which is to hunt down these bodies, specialists, and they were raiding homes. There was a police presence on the streets when we were there, very much so. And there was a lot of concern about that. So these bodies have been taken away from Inkari to somewhere else. And we didn't know where they were. We asked if we could see the bodies, and Thierry said, "Well, I would have to have to talk to somebody, see if that can be arranged. I don't think you're going to get a chance to see them." And that was a real shame, but we were quite happy to conduct the interviews nevertheless. But the following early hours of the morning, back at the hotel, around about 2:15 in the morning, my mobile phone rang. And it was a gentleman on the phone. It was said that he'd been in talks with the Inkari Institute, and they're quite happy to show us a few items, and that they would pick us up from the hotel the following day. But they did have some conditions. We weren't allowed to film the driver nor identify the vehicle, and we weren't allowed to take our cell phones with us. So immediately, I said, yes, of course, absolutely, because the excitement took over of actually, for me, it was about seeing Maria, the body. That represented something unusual. The smaller ones I was not as much interested in, because for me, it was very difficult to determine what they were. But definitely Maria was a body. It wasn't a mummy. She had her internal organs, so she definitely was a body. And that's where my excitement came. I said, yes, of course. Only in hindsight, I actually realised what I'd actually done, because travelling out into the unknowns with people you don't know, going to a location you don't know, without any communications, in a place like that, with camera equipment, is probably not, for the faint-hearted. The gentleman came, picked us up from the hotel, and I thought immediately he was going to take us to some hidden location in Cusco. He didn't. He actually kept driving through Cusco and out of Cusco up into the mountains. And it was about 45 minutes to an hour later. We were up on the top of those mountains, and I believe it was around about 14,500 feet by then. And it was very difficult. Even the vehicle itself was struggling at times, because I just don't think it was getting enough oxygen in the engine, and a few times it almost stalled. And we ended up on the top of these mountains, and I could not see anything for miles and miles. Only me, the sky, and the condors. And we did a few little video clips backwards and forwards. We asked if we could film the vehicle from a distance, just for the documentary that we were doing. And the guy said he was very reluctant at first, but we did manage to, should we say, tip him to do anything for money. And he allowed us to film the car from a distance. We didn't film him, of course. And we got back in the car, further 15 minutes. We turned up at a location. It was like an old warehouse. There was vaqueros stood outside, just staring at us, blaring, you know, just staring there, and that was very foreboding. And we got out. There was rubbish on the street. There was scrapping dogs. Wild dogs were fighting. And you know, it was such an out of place feeling, you know, from a British person being so out of place. And there was some worries, but we were taken inside, and we were taken into a room. Now, what's interesting is, Grant, is that this warehouse, which was old and run down, it looked like it was falling down until you get into this particular room. As soon as you walk into that room, it was like a hospital room, completely different surroundings. There was like an operating table, and there was an investigation beds with tools on and lights and x-ray machines, and of course what they did is they wanted to show us a few things, and I said about filming, and I said, no, you can't do any filming. And I said, look, it's really important that we get something out here. Nobody's going to believe us. You know, we can say what we can say, but who's going to believe us if we've got no record of it? You know, you're safe with us. We're working with Inkari. We've got their backs. They said, you know, we're just here to try and find out the story. We're not interested in you guys. And he said, well, okay. I said, there's one condition. You can film the bodies, what we're going to be shown. But if you point your camera towards any one of us, and there were 3 of them, big guys, then you'll lose all your equipment. It's as simple as that. So we said, right, okay, that was the agreement. We made sure very carefully that we weren't going to film them. And they brought them out in a systematic order of size. Now, the first one they brought out was about just over 12 inches long. And they put it on this, you know, this bed, and I was looking at this, and I immediately realised that this is nothing real. This is a fake. You know, it's got the jaw of a fish. It's got the head of a fish. It's got no lungs. It's just a manufactured sculpture of some sort. And I just blurted out with it. My cameraman, Barry, he was a bit worried because he thought, you know, don't just blurt it out, but I did. You know, I just said, well, this is fake. You know, I want to see the good stuff, you know. And he looked a little bit white in the face, Barry, as he looked over at me, and he thought, and then I kind of realised, was there a little bit abrupt there, you know? Anyway, surprisingly, they looked over at me, and they actually agreed. They said, yes, this one is fake. This one is fake. It was sent to us some time ago. And I thought, okay, well, was I being tested? You know, I'm not too sure. It sounded like a bit of a test. Then they brought some small skulls out, about the size of a small coconut. And we've seen them on the internet. You got large eyes, elongated skull. Got this grey colour powder covering them. We didn't know what that was at the time. In fact, it looked very much like plaster of Paris, to be honest with you. That's the white colour it was covering over these. I didn't know what that was. I did a visual inspection. I couldn't really identify them as real skulls, to be honest with you. Though that they looked a little very unusual, I couldn't identify them, what I was actually looking at. They were, you know, so we took some measurements and sizes, and we looked at the x-rays and the scans, and clearly the x-rays looks like a skull. The x-ray shows that. And I thought, I don't know really what I'm looking at here. Then they brought some small bodies out, which these ones were about 29 inches in length, a little bit bigger, intact, full bodies, 3 fingers, 3 toes. And they didn't seem to have any lungs. They didn't have any nasal passages. On the x-rays, they didn't have any motorized functioning in the anatomically. They didn't have ball joints. So they wouldn't have been able to move their arms or the legs. And you know, I'm looking at this, and I'm saying on camera, you know, I'm pointing out there's no ball joints, there's no lungs, there's no nasal passage. You know, this doesn't look like it's a living thing. It looks, maybe it's something that's manufactured. But what is interesting is that it would seem that these bodies are actually manipulated, manufactured out of bones, actual real bones. So the problematics of this when it comes to DNA and DNA extraction, you're going to analyze these bones and get an extraction of DNA, and it's going to tell you how old those bones are, but it doesn't identify what it's coming from. And as far as I was aware, I was very suspicious about these 29-inch bodies because as far as I'm concerned, they look like they've been somehow manufactured using animal bones, numerous different types of animal bones. But I still was waiting for that Maria to come, and of course, she arrived. There was a smaller one as well, which is referred to as Wawita. Now, Wawita is, by all intents, looks to be about a 2-year-old child. However, on visual examination, she actually had quite a number of her teeth, which would put her probably more at an age of 4 or 5. So she was extremely small for her age. But what was also interesting is that 3 fingers, 3 toes. But these were different. These didn't look manufactured. These looked real. You know, they looked like there was even some form of dermal ridging on the actual fingers. The toes are curled up, which is a normal position in death. What happens, you know, and she was very much a living body at one time, you know. So, and she's not a mummy. She's got her internal organs, just like Maria has. And we looked at the X-rays, and she was definitely, yes, most definitely a body we were dealing with. And of course, then they brought Maria out, and that was a whole different ball game. Now, what happened, Grant, was I'm looking over at my cameraman, and he's an investigative researcher as well. He's very well known. His name's Barry Fitzgerald, and we've worked together consistently for quite some time. And I've learned to trust anything that Barry tells me, more so than anything. And when Maria came, this plastic box, the guys came over and started to lift this big plastic box out of this wardrobe. And as soon as they lifted the lid, I could look in and I could see this big body, and it was Maria. I turned to Barry, and Barry's got tears rolling down his face. He's blood red in the face. He's shaking a little, and he looks over me and says, "Oh my God!" And I'm trying to work out what's actually happening with Barry. Is it because it's a hot room? There's no air. Is it the altitude sickness? Am I going to lose my cameraman? Is he going to faint? You know, this is one of the things that were going through my mind, Grant. And it turns out that wasn't the case. When I was talking to Barry after the examinations, Barry said when they brought this plastic box out, as soon as they lifted this lid, whack, something hit him. He said something, I can't explain it, he said, I can only say some type of presence, some energy or something it's just filled the room, and it affected me in a way that I've never experienced before. And I said, and I immediately realised that there was something about this body. And Barry's quite sensitive, you know. And I come to a liar when he tells me that. I absolutely can take it to the bank. And he said, you know, if this, maybe it was a deity, maybe she was worshipped. You know, maybe, you know, if she was alive, I don't think I could even be in her presence, to be honest with you. I think she would have took me to my knees. And I was really shocked. I was taken back because Barry's quite, you know, he's quite scientific, and I was taken back by that. But we conducted the examination. Barry managed to force his way on, and Maria was taken out. And this is when it became rather interesting, because we immediately realised that she does have an elongated skull. It could be down to boarding. Orbital rims of her eyes are slightly larger than what they should be for the size of the skull. I know that you can get slight deviations when humans are living in different areas of the planet, depending on how much light is around, but they are quite consistently larger than average. She didn't have no ears, but she did have ear canals, a bit like a sea lion. You know, it has just the hole. And I couldn't see any evidence of an ear actually even being removed, to be honest. I couldn't see any. She was definitely female, according to the rib count from what we did, because we could turn around, look at the ribs, we could count the ribs. Looks to be a female. But due to being a female, I couldn't see no visual identification of breasts. I could not even see a navel. You know, I just couldn't see it. And I was looking, you know, a lot for these things, and I just couldn't see them. The most obvious thing was the 3 fingers and the 3 toes.